"Congratulations, you're fired, and she can have your chair." He laughed. I laughed too, because the countdown timer on my phone had just hit 9 minutes, 10 seconds. 19 lines of code I'd hidden for 6 months, not to destroy, just to unscrew each bolt one by one. 6 more minutes, and everything he built on my sweat would freefall. News vans were already parked outside the lobby. I stood in the rain watching a $12 million empire wobble. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I used to believe in partnership, the kind where 2 hands build something bigger than either could alone. Victor and I started Sentinel Forge Labs in a converted loft above a Vietnamese restaurant in Denver. The smell of pho mixing with burnt coffee and the ozone scent of overheating servers. We were 30 then, young enough to think 70-hour weeks were sustainable, old enough to know exactly what we were building, the most sophisticated threat detection system the enterprise market had ever seen. I handled the architecture, every line of code, every security protocol, every fail-safe that kept our clients' data locked tighter than a Federal Reserve. Victor handled the business side, charming investors with his Harvard MBA smile and that particular way he had of making complex technology sound like common sense. We were good together. Hell, we were married, though that felt secondary to what we were creating. Then Sloan Keating arrived. Head of Operations, her business card said, Berkeley MBA. Her resume boasted. What neither document mentioned was the way she positioned herself, always at Victor's right elbow during meetings, her hand resting on the back of his chair like she was claiming territory. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. The startup world attracts ambitious people. Proximity to power is part of the game. But then came the translations. What Evelyn means is, Victor would say, cutting me off mid-explanation to the engineering team I'd hired and trained. Sloan would nod, adding her own interpretation of my technical decisions, dumbing them down until they sounded like suggestions rather than architectural imperatives. The conference room, once scattered with my whiteboard diagrams and sticky notes, transformed into a sterile glass box where my voice seemed to hit the walls and dissolve. I started noticing other things. Consulting invoices from Sloan's previous company for strategic advisory services that seemed to involve a lot of late-night strategy sessions, travel receipts for conferences where only 2 attendees were listed, though 3 were supposedly attending. The way Victor's assistant suddenly couldn't seem to add me to calendar invites properly. The smart play would have been to confront him directly. The smarter play was what I actually did. I started documenting everything. Screenshots at 11:43 p.m., audio recordings of meetings where my contributions were mysteriously absent from the official notes, an encrypted journal detailing every line of code I wrote, every system I designed, every security protocol that kept our $12 million valuation from collapsing into digital dust. The photo folder on my personal laptop grew thick with evidence, 23 screenshots of Victor and Sloan's planning retreat at a mountain cabin, their shared calendar accidentally visible on the conference room screen during a client call, email threads where my name had been systematically removed from project credits, meeting invites for restructuring discussions that somehow never made it to my inbox. I wasn't stupid. I could read the writing bleeding through the wall. The pizza boxes from our startup days had been replaced by catered sushi lunches I wasn't invited to. The late-night coding sessions where Victor would bring me coffee and kiss my neck while I worked had transformed into closed-door meetings where Sloan's laugh echoed down the hallway like a warning bell. So I did what any good engineer would do. I prepared for system failure. I documented my intellectual property claims. I time-stamped every original repository. And in the depths of our codebase, I planted something. Not malicious, not destructive, just insurance. 19 lines of code that would only matter if someone who didn't understand the system's heartbeat tried to perform surgery on it. They thought they were being subtle. Victor and Sloan. They thought I was too buried in code to notice the ground shifting beneath my feet. They forgot that I built this company's foundation with my own hands, and I knew exactly where every load-bearing wall stood. And more importantly, I knew which ones were purely decorative. The gaslighting started subtly, like carbon monoxide poisoning, odorless, invisible. Deadly if you don't catch it in time. Evelyn seems overwhelmed, Sloane mentioned during a board meeting, her voice dripping concern while her eyes stayed cold as server room air conditioning. Perhaps we should redistribute some of her responsibilities. Victor nodded, playing the supportive husband. We want what's best for everyone's well-being. Well-being. That's what they called it when they started routing my direct reports through Sloane. When the weekly architecture reviews I'd run for 3 years suddenly became optional for the person who designed the entire architecture. When my keycard mysteriously stopped working for the server room at 10:30 p.m., right when I usually did my best debugging. You're being paranoid, Victor said when I confronted him in his office. The one that used to be our office, back when we shared everything. Sloane sat perched on his desk, reviewing urgent documents that required her immediate attention during our conversation. The team feels you're becoming difficult to work with, he continued, not meeting my eyes. Sloane's been fielding complaints. What complaints? I kept my voice level, though my hand was already reaching for my phone to record. It's not about specific incidents, Sloane interjected, her manicured nails tapping against her iPad. It's more about atmosphere, culture fit. Culture fit, the startup world's favorite euphemism for we want you gone, but need it to look like your idea. That night, I stayed late, not in the office, but at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, remoting into our systems through a VPN tunnel they didn't know existed. I pulled up the email server logs, the Slack archives, the Git commit history. My name was being systematically erased. Commits I'd authored were being amended with Victor as the primary contributor. Design documents I'd written were being re-uploaded with Sloane listed as co-creator. They were rewriting history while I was still living in it. The smoking gun came at 2:17 a.m., buried in a draft email Victor hadn't meant to sync to the cloud. Restructuring proposal, post-E transition. Post-E. They couldn't even use my whole name while planning my execution. The document outlined everything. The severance package designed to look generous, but included a non-compete that would lock me out of the security industry for 3 years. The communication plan to explain my departure to clients. The timeline that had me out by month's end, just 2 weeks away. But the best part? The technical transition plan. Sloane had drafted it herself, full of MBA buzzwords and fundamental misunderstandings of our system architecture. She thought our load balancers were just traffic directors. She referred to our custom encryption protocol as standard SSL. She planned to optimize our database queries by removing what she called redundant failsafes. Those weren't redundant. They were the cardiovascular system of our entire operation. I sat in that coffee shop, laptop screen reflecting off my glasses, and laughed. Actually laughed, until the barista looked concerned. They were planning to perform heart surgery with a butter knife, and they had no idea the patient was rigged to flatline if operated on by anyone but the original surgeon. The next morning, I walked into the office with a smile. I sat through the meeting where Sloane presented innovative optimization strategies that were literally my ideas from 6 months ago, repackaged with prettier PowerPoints. I nodded when Victor mentioned bringing in an external consultant to review our technical infrastructure. Code for someone to justify firing you. I even offered to help with the transition, documenting our systems in meticulous detail. What I didn't document were the invisible triggers I'd woven throughout, timeout configurations that would cascade if altered, log rotation schedules that would eat disk space if modified, back-off policies that would interpret any change as a potential attack and lock down tighter than Fort Knox. You're taking this really well, Victor said, almost suspicious, when I volunteered to create a comprehensive handover document. I want what's best for Sentinel Forge, I replied, fingers already typing the first of 19 lines that would soon matter more than anything else I'd ever written. He believed me, they both did, because they'd forgotten the first rule of engineering. The person who builds the machine is the only one who truly knows which screws can come loose without consequence, and which ones hold everything together. The 19 lines weren't malicious. I need you to understand that. I wasn't some scorned woman planting digital dynamite. I was an engineer protecting her creation from amateur surgeons who thought they could operate without understanding anatomy. Each line was surgical, precise, necessary. Lines 1-3. Modified the timeout handlers to expect a specific heartbeat pattern, one that matched my typing rhythm when I coded at 3 a.m., caffeine-fueled and focused. Change that rhythm, and the timeouts would start to drift, imperceptibly at first, like a musician slowly falling out of tempo. Lines 4-8. Adjusted the log rotation to account for my particular way of commenting code. Sparse but specific. Timestamps in Unix time rather than human-readable format. Anyone else's commenting style would cause the logs to multiply like cancer cells, eating disk space 1 percentage point at a time. Lines 9-14. The load balancer configurations, now tuned to my specific testing patterns. I always tested with prime numbers. 7 concurrent users, 13 requests per second, 23-second intervals. Sloane's MBA brain would default to nice round numbers, 10, 20, 50. The system would interpret these as potential DDoS patterns and start throttling legitimate traffic. Lines 15-18. The beautiful ones. The database connection pooling that expected my signature debugging queries every 12 hours. Invisible health checks I'd been running since day one. Stop those queries, and the pools would slowly drain. Like forgetting to water a plant. It would take days to notice, weeks to die completely. Line 19. The crown jewel, a simple cron job that would activate exactly 9 minutes and 10 seconds after the admin credentials were changed without my biometric confirmation. Not destructive, just a whisper to certain monitoring services that something might be amiss. Enough to trigger automated security audits from our biggest clients. I wrote these lines over 6 lunches, using the old MacBook from our startup days, the one Victor had given me for our anniversary with "Build Something Beautiful" engraved on the back. The machine still had root access to everything, grandfathered in from when security meant a locked door and trust meant sharing passwords. "You seem happier lately," Victor observed one evening, finding me in the kitchen area refilling my coffee at 8:45 p.m. Sloane had gone home an hour earlier, but her perfume lingered like a threat. "Just enjoying the work," I said, and it wasn't a lie. There was something pure about coding when you knew it was the last code you'd write for a place, like a master chef preparing their final meal, every ingredient measured perfectly, every technique flawless. "The transition document you're preparing," he started, then paused. "It's very thorough." "You'll need it," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "This system is more delicate than you realize." He laughed, actually laughed. "It's software, Evelyn, not a newborn." That's when I knew he'd never understood what we'd built together. To him, it was just code. Replaceable, updatable, disposable. He didn't understand that enterprise security systems are like coral reefs. Every component evolved together, dependent on each other in ways that aren't always visible until something dies and the whole ecosystem collapses. I documented everything else meticulously, every function, every dependency, every integration, 1,000 pages of technical documentation that would make perfect sense to someone who understood the system's soul. But Sloane didn't have soul. She had spreadsheets and methodologies and a business degree that taught her to see code as cost centers rather than living things. The night before my scheduled termination, I made one last commit from my personal laptop. Not to the production code. I wasn't that reckless. Just to my private repository, time-stamped and digitally signed. Final optimization complete. System will maintain stability under original parameters only. It was my confession and my alibi rolled into one. I'd optimized the system perfectly. For me. Anyone else trying to run it would be like a pianist trying to play a violin. Same music theory, completely different instrument. "Tomorrow's the day," Victor said. Appearing in my office doorway at 11:15 p.m., I was packing up photos. Our wedding, the day we signed our first enterprise client, the champagne celebration when we hit 10 million in valuation. "I know," I said simply. "It doesn't have to be ugly." I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd married had been replaced by someone who spoke in HR platitudes and looked at me like a problem to be solved rather than a person he'd once loved. "No," I agreed, sliding the last photo into my box. "It really doesn't." He left, satisfied with my compliance. But compliance and surrender are different things. One is strategic, the other is defeat. And I hadn't spent 6 months writing 19 lines of poetry just to surrender. The termination meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. I arrived at 8:45, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to our first investor pitch. The one Victor used to say made me look like I could kill a man with code and make it look like natural causes. He'd never know how prophetic that was. The CEO's office had been redecorated since I'd last been invited in. Gone were the startup posters and the framed first dollar we'd earned. Now it was all walnut panels and leather-bound books no one would ever read. Props for a performance of success. Victor sat behind his massive desk like a king on a throne he'd forgotten I'd helped build. Sloane stood by the window in a red sheath dress that probably cost more than our first month's server bills. HR, a nervous woman named Patricia who'd been hired 3 weeks ago, clutched a manila folder like a life preserver. "Evelyn," Victor started, his CEO voice on, the one he practiced in the mirror. "We appreciate you coming in early." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, settling into the chair across from him. My phone was already recording, tucked in my blazer pocket at just the right angle. He pushed an envelope across the desk. "Effective immediately," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We've prepared a generous severance package." I didn't touch the envelope. Generous. That's an interesting word choice. 3 months' salary, continued health coverage through the quarter, and, Patricia started, and a non-compete that would essentially end my career, I finished. I read the draft you forgot to remove from the shared drive. Victor's jaw tightened. Sloane moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder. Territorial, possessive. "It's standard," she said. "Surely someone with your experience understands that." "Someone with my experience understands exactly what this is." I kept my voice steady, professional. "But please, continue with your script." Patricia fumbled through the termination paperwork, each whereas, and heretofore, a nail in a coffin they thought they were building for me. Stock options forfeited, access revoked, intellectual property transferred. "Any company property needs to be returned," Patricia squeaked. "Laptops, phones, access cards." "Of course," I said, pulling out my company MacBook Pro and phone, setting them on Victor's desk. "Though I'll be keeping my personal laptop, the old one, from before." That's fine," Victor said quickly. Too quickly. He wanted this over. "It has sentimental value," I added, watching his face. "Our first commits, the original architecture plans. You remember, back when it was just us in that loft, building something that mattered." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just impatience. "That was a long time ago." 6 years, I said. "But who's counting?" Sloane cleared her throat. "We'll need your credentials changed immediately. Security protocols." "Already done," Patricia chirped, proud of her efficiency. "As of 9:10 a.m., all access will be terminated." I glanced at my watch. 9:07. 9:10 exactly? "Company policy requires a brief grace period for final email access," Patricia explained, "in case there are personal items to retrieve." 3 minutes, I smiled, the kind of smile that would haunt Victor later when he understood what it meant. How thoughtful. "Is there anything else?" Victor asked, already shifting papers, ready to move on to his next meeting, his next conquest, his next betrayal. I stood, picking up the empty box I'd brought, empty because everything that mattered was already gone, backed up, documented, protected. "Just one thing," I said, pausing at the door. They all looked at me, expecting tears maybe, or threats, or the kind of emotional breakdown they could use to justify their decisions. 9:10, you said? Patricia nodded, confused. "Perfect timing," I said. "You might want to have it on standby, just in case." "In case of what?" Sloane demanded. But I was already walking out, my heels clicking against the marble floor in a rhythm that matched the countdown in my head. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. I passed my old team in the hallway, Marcus, the junior developer I'd mentored. Couldn't meet my eyes. Sarah from QA was crying. They knew this was wrong. But they also had mortgages and families and couldn't afford to be heroes. 2 minutes, 10 seconds. The elevator was held open by James from security, the one who used to joke that I lived in the building. "I'm sorry, Ms. Hart," he whispered. "This ain't right." "It's about to be," I said softly, watching the floors tick by. 1 minute, 30 seconds. I reached the lobby, all glass and chrome and artificial plants that would never need the kind of careful tending real growth required. Through the windows, I could see news vans. Someone had leaked the story of my termination. "Founder forced out of unicorn startup" would be the headline, probably. 45 seconds. I pushed through the revolving door into the morning drizzle. Denver rain. Cold and clarifying. My phone buzzed. The automated notification that my credentials had been revoked. 10 seconds. I turned back to look at the building. Our building. My building. Somewhere on the 15th floor. Victor was probably already celebrating. Sloane was planning her promotion, and Patricia was filing paperwork. 5 seconds. My personal phone vibrated. A different notification. One I'd programmed myself. A simple message. Optimization protocol activated. 0. 9:10 a.m. The first domino had fallen. The rest would follow with mathematical precision, and there wasn't a thing they could do to stop it. The rain had turned the parking lot into a mirror, reflecting the Sentinel Forge building like it was already a memory. I stood by my car, phone in hand, watching the status dashboard I'd built years ago, the one they never knew I could still access through a read-only API that predated their security overhaul. 9:10 and 30 seconds. The first amber warning. TLS certificate validation starting to loop. Confused by the missing heartbeat pattern. Nothing critical yet. Just a hiccup. The kind of thing that happens sometimes, that you ignore because it usually resolves itself. 9:11. Customer portal response time creeping up. 400 milliseconds. 600. 800. The loading spinners were probably starting to appear on screens across the country. Law firms in New York. Hospitals in Chicago. Financial institutions in San Francisco. All wondering why their morning security reports were running slow. 9:11 and 45 seconds. The queue backlog beginning. Like a highway where one car taps its brakes and causes a wave of slowdowns miles behind. Sloane wouldn't understand the cascade theory. She'd probably be asking it to just restart something. 9:12 and 15 seconds. First probe from Warsaw. Our European edge servers were smart. When they detected anomalies, they'd reach out to verify. Then Tel Aviv joined in. Then Toronto. The system was confused, like an immune system detecting something wrong but not quite sure what to attack. Through the building's glass facade, I could see movement on the 15th floor, figures rushing past windows. Someone wheeled a whiteboard into view. They were going analog already, faster than I'd expected. 9:12 and 50 seconds. The monitoring alerts would be screaming now. Not the public-facing systems, those were still limping along, but the internal dashboards would be Christmas trees of red and amber warnings, database connection pools draining, log files multiplying, load balancers stuttering between too safe and not safe enough configurations. My phone buzzed. Marcus, my former junior developer. "What did you do?" I didn't respond. He'd figure it out eventually. They all would. 9:13 and 30 seconds. The admin credential honeypot triggered. Someone, probably Sloane in her panic, had tried to force an override with credentials that shouldn't exist anymore. The system, trained by my paranoid security protocols, interpreted this as a potential breach. It would start shutting down non-essential services, going into fortress mode. 9:14. The first news alert popped up on my phone. Breaking. Sentinel Forge, systems experiencing nationwide outage. The reporters in those vans weren't here for my termination story anymore. They smelled blood in the water. A security guard burst out of the building's front door, speaking urgently into his radio. Through the rain, I could see more people gathering in the lobby, their faces lit by phone screens as they tried to understand what was happening. 9:14 and 45 seconds. Stock price notification. Down 3% in pre-market trading. The algorithms had noticed before the humans fully understood. Pioneer Trust, our biggest client, would be calling any second. Their CEO had my personal number, the one Victor didn't know about. Right on cue. My phone rang. "Evelyn, what the hell is happening over there?" Graham Pierce's voice was tight with controlled panic. "I wouldn't know. Graham, I was terminated 18 minutes ago." Silence. Then, "They fired you?" "Effective immediately. And now the system is drawing its own conclusions," I said carefully. "Systems are delicate things. They get attached to their architects." He laughed, bitter and knowing. "How bad is this going to get?" I watched a trio of senior engineers sprint through the lobby, laptops clutched to their chests like life preservers. That depends entirely on how quickly they can learn 6 years of intuitive knowledge. 9:16. The cascade was complete. Every system was still running. I hadn't destroyed anything, but it was like an orchestra where every musician was playing a slightly different tempo. Technically music, practically chaos. The rain had turned into a proper downpour, but I didn't move. I stood there, watching the building that had been my life become a crime scene of my own making. News vans were repositioning for better shots. Someone had brought out professional lighting. My phone buzzed again. "Victor." I let it go to voicemail. Then again, I declined. The third time, I answered. "Hello, Victor?" "Get back here, now." His CEO voice was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. "I'm afraid I don't work there anymore. You were very clear about that. Evelyn, please." And there it was, the please, the crack in his armor. "The entire system is failing." "No," I corrected him, watching another engineer run past the windows, gesticulating wildly. "The system is working exactly as designed. It's just not designed for you anymore." Through the phone, I could hear alarms, shouting. Sloane's voice high and desperate in the background. "Just fix it! How hard can it be?" How hard can it be? The 4 most dangerous words in technology. 6 minutes, I said softly. "What?" "It took 6 minutes for $12 million to become worthless. That's $2 million per minute. Impressive optimization, don't you think?" "This is sabotage. I'll sue you. You'll find 19 lines of code written 6 months ago, fully documented, part of standard optimization protocols. You'll find my signature on every commit, properly timestamped. You'll find that I did my job exactly as specified. The system just became very particular about who it talks to." The 17th floor windows were full of faces now, employees watching their company's valuation evaporate in real time. Some were probably updating their resumes already. "I can make this stop," I said, surprising myself with the offer. "What do you want?" Eagerness, desperation, hope. I thought about it, standing in the rain, watching his empire fracture along the fault lines I'd carefully drawn. What did I want? My phone became a lightning rod for panic. Graham Pierce from Pioneer Trust called back twice. The FBI's cybercrime division left a voicemail. 3 reporters had somehow gotten my personal number, but the flood of calls from inside Sentinel Forge told the real story. 17 missed calls from board members, 43 from engineering, and 1 text from Marcus that just said, "The Russians didn't do this, did they?" I texted back, "Ask Victor who really built this system." The irony was delicious. They were looking for external threats, hackers, nation-states, corporate espionage, when the truth was so much simpler. The system had simply become homesick for its creator. "Ms. Hart?" A reporter had found me in the parking lot, mascara running in the rain but camera-ready determination in her eyes. "Can you comment on the Sentinel Forge system failure? We understand you were terminated this morning." No comment, I said, but she persisted. Sources say you were the chief architect. Is this connected to your departure? I looked directly into her camera. Complex systems require careful handling. When you remove expertise without proper transition, consequences follow naturally. She pushed harder. Are you saying this is retaliation? I'm saying, I spoke clearly, each word measured, that when you fire the person who built your house, you better hope they left you accurate blueprints. My phone rang again. Victor, I put him on speaker so the reporter could hear. The FBI is here, he said without preamble. They think we're under attack. Are you? Evelyn, for God's sake. Did you tell them you fired your security architect 90 minutes ago? The person who knows every vulnerability, every back door, every single point of failure? Silence. The reporter's eyes widened. Come back, Victor said finally. Whatever you want, name it. 48%, I said. What? 48% equity, full restoration of my CTO title, veto power over all technical decisions, and Sloan goes, today. I could hear muffled arguing in the background. Sloane's voice, shrill. This is extortion. No. I thought extortion would be demanding 51%. 48 was just enough to be essential, but not enough to take over. I wanted him to live with the constant reminder that he needed me more than I needed him. The stock dropped 12%, Victor said weakly. The board is threatening to remove me. Then you better decide quickly. Every minute costs you another $2 million, remember? More muffled conversation. I could hear terms like fiduciary duty and emergency protocols and catastrophic failure, the language of desperation dressed up in corporate speak. I need guarantees, Victor said finally, that you can fix this. I don't give guarantees to people who blindside me with termination papers, but I will say this. I'm the only person who can fix it. Your choice. The reporter was recording everything, her eyes bright with the kind of story that makes careers. I didn't care. Let the world know what happened when you tried to erase the person who built your kingdom. Fine, Victor spat, but I need you here now. Send the paperwork to my lawyer first, signed, notarized, and Victor, make sure Sloan is gone when I get there. I don't want to see her face in my building again. Your building? It was always my building. You just held the lease. I hung up. The reporter started to ask another question, but my phone exploded with notifications. The FBI wanting statements, the SEC announcing an investigation, 3 major clients activating their exit clauses. The cascade wasn't just technical anymore, it was institutional. A black town car pulled up, splashing through the puddles. The window rolled down, revealing Graham Pierce himself. Get in, he said. We need to talk. I looked back at the building one more time. Through the rain and chaos, I could see someone, probably Sloan, being escorted out by security. A banker's box in her arms. The red dress looked less powerful now, more like a distress signal. Ms. Hart, the reporter called. One more question. Do you regret any of this? I turned back to her, rain streaming down my face, and told the truth. I regret letting it get this far. I should have done this 6 months ago when they started erasing me. Graham's door was still open. Evelyn, seriously, get in. I have a proposition. But my phone buzzed with a document from Victor's lawyer. 48% equity, CTO restoration, technical veto power, everything I'd demanded, in writing. Rain check, Graham, I said. I have a company to rebuild. You're going back? He looked incredulous. After what they did? I'm not going back, I corrected. I'm taking what was always mine. There's a difference. As I walked toward the building, my phone lit up with a text from Marcus. Sloan just got perp walked out. Victor's locked himself in the server room trying to fix things. He's made it worse. We need you. No. I thought, you need the person Victor and Sloan tried to delete. You need the ghost in the machine. The one who knew that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying something. It's making them realize they destroyed themselves the moment they betrayed you. The security guard held the door open. Welcome back, Ms. Hart. Never left, James, I said, water dripping from my hair onto the marble floor. Just waited for them to realize it. The elevator climbed toward the 15th floor, toward the chaos, toward Victor's shattered pride and the empire he'd thought he could rule without its architect. The red numbers counted up like a scorecard. Another 2 million. Another 2 million. Another 2 million. By the time I reached the server room, they'd lost 26 million in value. The price of betrayal, calculated down to the penny. The server room looked like a war zone. Cable spaghetti spilled across the floor where someone had ripped panels open looking for physical problems. 3 laptops balanced on a single rack, their screens full of terminal windows scrolling error messages like digital prayers. Victor stood in the middle of it all, his $5,000 suit jacket thrown in a corner, shirt soaked with sweat, typing frantically at a keyboard. He looked up when I entered. His face was a masterpiece of defeat. Red eyes, stubble already showing at 2 p.m, the kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing you've lost a game you didn't know you were playing. Evelyn, just my name, no accusations, no anger, just resignation. Victor, I surveyed the damage. You've been trying to force restart the load balancers. How did you? He stopped. Of course I knew. Every failed attempt was logged, and I could read those logs like sheet music. Where's Sloan? I asked, though I already knew. Gone. Security escorted her out an hour ago. He laughed bitterly. She tried to take her client files, as if she had any actual clients. I moved to the main terminal, my fingers finding the keys like coming home. Around us, the server room hummed with the sound of millions of dollars hemorrhaging by the second. The board? I asked, not looking at him. Emergency meeting at 3. They want my head. He slumped against a rack. Graham Pierce already called for my resignation. And? I told them I had you coming back. Bought myself 12 hours. 12 hours. I could fix this in 12 minutes. But he didn't need to know that yet. Marcus appeared in the doorway, relief flooding his face when he saw me. Behind him, Sarah from QA and 3 senior engineers crowded in, all looking at me like I was their salvation. The system's completely fragmented, Marcus reported. We've lost synchronization across all nodes. The European servers are in lockdown. The databases are refusing connections. And the logs, he trailed off. The logs are multiplying exponentially, I finished. Eating disk space faster than you can clear them. How? Victor demanded. This worked perfectly yesterday. Yesterday you had me, I said simply, pulling up the architecture diagram on the screen. Today you have the system I designed to protect itself from unauthorized changes. I started typing, not the fixes, not yet, but diagnostics, letting them see the full scope of what they'd triggered. Every screen in the room lit up with cascading failures, each one time-stamped from 9:10 a.m. forward. This is sabotage, Victor said weakly. This is architecture, I corrected. I built a system that evolved with my patterns, my rhythms, my logic. You tried to transplant a new heart without matching blood types. Sarah spoke up, voice small. Can you fix it? I turned to face them all. My team. The people who'd watched my execution this morning and said nothing. But we need to discuss terms. We already agreed, Victor started. No, not with you. With them. I gestured to the team. They need to understand that this isn't just about code. It's about respect, about recognizing whose hands built what they rely on. Marcus stepped forward. We know, Evelyn. We always knew. He looked at Victor, then back at me. We were cowards. Cowardice in tech is letting MBA logic override engineering reality, I said. Which brings me to my first decision as restored CTO. Comprehensive security audit, starting with executive access privileges. Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at it and paled. FBI wants a full briefing. They're threatening to suspend our government contracts. Then you better let me work, I said, turning back to the terminal. But I didn't start fixing things, not yet. Instead, I pulled up the commit history, showing them the 19 lines, each one time-stamped months ago, each one documented as standard optimization. You see this? I asked the room. This isn't malicious code. This is code that expects competence. The system didn't fail. It worked exactly as designed. It just stopped recognizing amateur administrators as valid users. How long? Victor asked quietly. How long have you been planning this? Planning? I laughed. I wasn't planning anything. I was protecting my work from people who thought they could run it without understanding it, like a surgeon leaving notes that say, "Don't cut here unless you know what you're doing." But you knew, he accused. You knew what would happen when they changed the credentials. I suspected, I admitted. The same way I suspected you were planning to replace me with your girlfriend. The difference is, my suspicions were defensive, yours were offensive. The room was silent except for the hum of servers slowly dying. Through the window, I could see news vans multiplying in the parking lot like digital viruses. Fix it, Victor said finally. Please. Oh, I will, I said, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. But first, everyone needs to understand something. This system, this company, it runs on code I wrote, architecture I designed, security I implemented. You can take my name off the door. You can give my title to someone else, but you cannot, ever, take my work and pretend it belongs to someone who didn't build it. I looked directly at Victor. Your girlfriend thought she could optimize a system she didn't understand. You thought you could run a tech company without respecting technology. This, I gestured at the chaos around us, is what happens when you value manipulation over competence. My phone buzzed. Another 3 clients activating exit clauses. The company value was in freefall, and Victor knew it. Please, he said again, and this time it sounded like what it was. Complete surrender. I smiled and began to type, but I didn't enter the fixes. Instead, I pulled up one more screen. Sloane's access logs from the past 6 months. Every late-night strategy session, every attempt to access code she didn't understand, every email where she tried to claim credit for my work. Before I fix this, I said, we're documenting everything, consider it insurance, so this never happens again. Victor nodded, defeated. He'd lost more than money today. He'd lost the illusion that he was anything more than a man who'd gotten lucky enough to marry someone smarter than him, then stupid enough to betray her. Time to rebuild. But this time, on my terms. The war room was set up in the pantry. The server room was too hot. The conference rooms too public. Someone had wheeled in 3 whiteboards, now covered in my handwriting as I mapped out the recovery sequence for the team. The red emergency lighting from the server status board painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. News crews had erected professional lighting outside, their cameras trained on our windows like snipers. Someone inside was definitely leaking. Every move we made appeared on social media within minutes. Live. Sentinel Forge Meltdown Continues scrolled across my phone screen. I stood at my old laptop, the one with Build Something Beautiful still etched on its surface, now scratched and worn from years of actual building. This machine held the keys to the kingdom, the original commits, the authentication certificates that predated their security upgrade, the root access they'd forgotten existed. Everyone ready? I asked the room. Marcus, Sarah, 5 senior engineers, and Victor, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 3 hours. They nodded. The FBI had given us until 4 p.m. to provide a full report. It was 3:48. I opened the terminal and began typing, not frantically, not desperately, but with the measured precision of someone defusing a bomb they'd built themselves. First, the heartbeat pattern. My fingers found their 3 a.m. rhythm, the syncopated typing pattern born from 1,000 late nights, caffeine, and the kind of focus that makes the world disappear. The system recognized it immediately, like a dog hearing its owner's whistle. The timeout handlers relaxed. The load balancers stopped their panicked shuttling. One by one, the amber warnings turned green. Second, the log rotation. I injected my signature commenting style. Sparse, Unix timestamps, the digital equivalent of my handwriting. The logs stopped multiplying, started organizing, began telling their story in a language the system understood. Third, The connection pools. I ran my debugging queries, prime numbers only, 7, 13, 23. The databases opened like flowers recognizing sunlight. The room held its breath as I reached the final step, the cron job that had started it all, still counting down to its next cycle of chaos. I commented it out, not deleted, never destroy evidence, just neutralized. Then I added a new line. And Evelyn Hart, Chief Architect. If you're reading this, you better know what you're doing. Enter. The effect was immediate, like watching a heart monitor stabilize after cardiac arrest. Green lights cascaded across the board. Response times dropped from 30 seconds to 30 milliseconds. The European servers came back online with apologetic chirps. "Holy shit," Marcus whispered. 6 minutes to destroy, 8 minutes to rebuild. "The best architects know how to do both," I said, pulling up the system status. Everything was green, everything was stable, everything was mine again. Victor's phone exploded with calls. Board members, the FBI, Graham Pierce, reporters. He looked at me, helpless. "Tell them the CTO has resolved the issue," I said. "Tell them it was an unauthorized configuration change that has been corrected. Tell them Sentinel Forge takes full responsibility and has implemented new protocols to prevent future incidents." He repeated my words verbatim to caller after caller, each time acknowledging my title, my authority, my ownership of what I'd built. The FBI agent arrived at 4:10, taking notes as I explained in careful, technical terms how a system optimized for one administrator could fail when operated by another. No crime, no hacking, just the digital equivalent of a heart rejecting a transplant. So this was, the agent searched for words. A very expensive lesson in respecting expertise. I finished. By 5 p.m., the stock had stabilized, down 18% for the day, but climbing. The bleeding had stopped. The patient would live. Victor found me in my office, my real office, the one with the view of the mountains, the one they'd tried to give to Sloan. He looked broken, older, smaller. "The board wants to see us both," he said quietly. "No," I corrected. "The board wants to see me. You're just the +1 now." He nodded, accepting this new reality, then, quieter. "Did you know? When you wrote those 19 lines, did you know this would happen?" I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd married, the partner I'd trusted, the CEO who'd tried to erase me. I knew that if someone who didn't understand my work tried to replace me, the work would resist. Just like I knew that if someone I loved betrayed me, I'd resist. I turned back to my screen. "The only difference is, the code was more predictable than you were." He left without another word. Through my window, I watched him cross the parking lot to his Tesla. Shoulders slumped. The king who'd discovered his throne had always belonged to the architect who'd built it. My phone buzzed. A text from Graham Pierce. "Dinner tomorrow? I have a proposition, one that respects what you're actually worth." I smiled, looking at the city lights starting to twinkle as evening fell. Victor thought he'd won when he got to keep the CEO title. He didn't understand yet that I'd taken something more valuable. Proof that without me, $12 million could evaporate in 6 minutes. The 19 lines were still there. Dormant but not dead, not a threat, just a reminder. A digital signature that said, "I built this, I protected this, and if you ever forget that again, it will protect itself." Some people burn bridges. I build them with hidden load-bearing limits, visible only to me. The news called it the 6-minute meltdown. The tech blogs called it the architect's revenge. But I knew what it really was. The moment everyone learned that in a world built on code, the person who writes the foundation owns the castle, no matter whose name is on the deed. I opened my laptop and started coding. Not patches or fixes this time, but something new, something better, something truly mine. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's creation they can never take away from you again. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate betrayal and digital justice. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of revenge resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed workplace injustice? How would you have handled Evelyn's situation? Your stories and perspectives make this community richer. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next story. Until then, remember, respect the architects in your life, digital or otherwise.